Okay, we are back, joined by two high-powered representatives from the Snow League, Scotty Bradfield, the head of broadcasting. Scotty, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us here today, Tom Dunmore, the VP of Marketing. Tom, nice to meet you.
You too.
Okay, we were just having our little preamble here before press and record. It sounds like at least Lucy and Scotty go back a ways. Maybe we start with Project X. Lucy, why don't you tee this off?
Yeah, legends on the pod today. You realize like you're in a podcast with the guy who basically established Red Bull Media House in the USA. Like absolute legend here. So I can't overstate the importance of this conversation because Scotty, you've probably forgotten more about broadcasts and content than most people ever know.
I didn't do it alone. I had a great team. I think you being a part of that team over the years and having the opportunity to have access to some amazing stories and the kind of the kind of the desire to tell stories that I think have been, underappreciated in the world, and having the platform to like really put them out. So yeah, it was an honor to be able to do that and work with some great people. And now as we move into our next chapters in the world, like we can take that experience and kind of expand it. So it's been really, really fun.
One of my first ever memories of working at Red Bull was around the time of Red Bull Project X.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the people who aren't familiar with the Snow League, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today, is, something that was launched by Shaun White,
Mm-hmm.
a competitive series that spans the globe and a massive, massive project led by one of the greatest athletes of all time. But one of my first memories of working at Red Bull was Red Bull Project X, which was this massive moment with Shaun White where Red Bull kind of invested in his attempt to, I think, win the first gold medal for snowboard halfpipe, if I remember correctly, where you guys went out and you had this like secret half pipe in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
You helied everybody in. You had foam pits. I think maybe one of the first
First
times
foam
that
pit.
had been done.
Yeah. So where that came from, which is really interesting. So there's a guy named Joe Prebich on the team, and Joe was kind of an athlete manager slash like media guy. He kind of played on both sides, and him and Shaun, when Shaun came on board, were really tight. And Shaun at the time was winning everything. Like every event he showed up to, slopestyle, half pipe, mixed event, whatever it was, rail jam, like he was crushing. He like won 30 something events in a row. And he couldn't go anywhere without being recognized or followed. And he was having a hard time training. And at that time, double corks didn't exist. There was this like a myth that it could be done. And so Joe and him got talking, and Joe came to me and was like, hey, when talking to Shaun and, thinking about doing a private pipe, what do you think about doing a private pipe? And I was like, yeah, let's try and figure this out. But like, we got to go someplace super off the grid to do it. So we started looking, and we went to the Yellowstone Club first. And the Yellowstone Club was just like, okay, we can do this, but it's going to cost like just enormous amount of money. Like it was crazy. Like it actually made more sense to build it in Silverton in the middle of the backcountry than it did taking it to the Yellowstone Club. So it ended up going and doing it in the backcountry at the base of Silverton Mountain. And, we helied in infrastructure, and we brought in cats and built a super pipe and in the first foam pit. And Shaun, in over, I want to say, a 2 or 3 month window, learn double corks. And we did it complete silent, like in a complete private silence. Like there was like 8 people, maybe 10 people at Red Bull and Red Bull North America that really knew about it. Only a couple people at the very senior level on the international side knew about it, because we had to keep it quiet. And most people don't realize this, but it's really kind of hard to keep a secret at Red Bull. And so we really kept it close to the chest. And when Shaun landed the first double cork, I remember getting a text from Claude and being like, he landed it. And I was just like, whoa, because we were getting shots of him dropping, like landing in the foam pit, but not landing it onto the tranny. And he landed it in the tranny, and he had hurt his ankle a couple times. He had gone down pretty hard. He had really earned it. And so, yeah, that was like this moment. And then he learned back to back. And then by the time he left Silverton, he had variations on the front side, the backside double done, and then he had his double Mickey was not quite landed. It was like sketch landing. He hadn't. It wasn't a lock, but he had it, but kind of didn't have it. And so that was like the cherry on top that he was practicing. And then right around that same time, Kevin got hurt, and because it was starting to come out that Sean had his private pipe, and then all the other guys, Danny, Kevin, they all were like, "Oh, we got to figure this out." So they were starting to huck their meat, frankly, in without airbags or anything. And then I believe Dew brought in an airbag, and they started jumping into airbags to try and figure out the air awareness piece of it all. But it was a fun project.
What a great example of just like condensed progression of a sport. Tom, bringing you in now, we've got some of Scotty's background here. Share a bit about your background, how you came to be connected with the Snow League.
Yeah, very different than Scotty. I don't have all those incredible stories from back in the day with Sean. New to winter sports, but that's why I'm at the Snow League. I worked previously at most recently at Major League Cricket, another emerging sports league that started up in the US, bringing top level professional cricket to America, and then worked on the Cricket World Cup that came to America to New York and Texas last summer. So, from that perspective, have a background in emerging sports. I worked in soccer for a long time. Soccer now more established in the US, but 20 years ago, not long after I moved to the US, soccer was much more obscure, especially following it. It was a big youth sport, but even watching top level European soccer back then was hard. It was difficult to follow it. So seeing soccer's incredible trajectory, was lucky to be a little bit part of that ride with a couple of different clubs and part of their launches and growth. And then worked in motorsports at the Indy 500 for several years. So kind of a completely different type of property with 100 years of history and stories and community and global reach, and very loud engines. Uh, and uh, so I've spanned kind of big traditional sports, emerging sports, team sports, and now into winter sports. And I think as our core executive team were putting together the Snow League, the thought was, how can we assemble a team that has incredible background in snowboarding and skiing and knows the sport inside out, like Scotty, like Ian Warder, our COO, was with Burton for 20 odd years. Cam Cricket, our head of events, these guys have been in the industry for forever and have been the best in it, and bring that side of it. And then how do we also add in people from other backgrounds that have done professional sports in other ways that may have slightly different perspectives and can help broaden the lens? My role is marketing, so it's how can we tell that story to new audiences? How can we take what's so awesome about the sport and hopefully build new fan bases for it? So I think that type of background, that mix of backgrounds and personalities we have, we're all incredibly passionate about building the Snow League and doing it, but we have this really healthy variety of insights and experience to bring to it. So that's what I bring to the table, at least.
Tom, one of the things that I love the most about working at Red Bull was this idea of cross pollination, because just like flipping through your LinkedIn, it reminds me of being in the room at Red Bull where you'd have a snowboarder across the table from you, but then you'd have a trail runner sitting next to you and a gamer across the table. And then everybody would start talking together and you'd see these sort of like new pieces of information get shared across different sports and stuff like that. And I've got to imagine that's one of the strengths that you bring to this organization. But looking back through your history of being involved with soccer, being involved with motorsports and then cricket, what are the things that you're kind of bringing, or what are the lessons that you've brought from these sports that you're kind of bringing to snow for potentially the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of what I would call like threads that run through how you promote and build community successfully that are transferable across sports as different as soccer and IndyCar racing and snowboarding, and that's you still need to be authentic to the grassroots, and you need to bring them into the journey from the beginning and have them help you shape it and build it. Because if you do that, everyone's really part of it, and you can make what you're doing better. You know, when I built a soccer club from the ground up, first talk to the fans who already want that team to exist. What are they expecting out of it? What do they want from it? What's going to make them feel like they own a little bit of it, whether they financially do or not, but that they feel that emotional ownership over it, and they want to promote it. They want to get out there, spend their free time on it, because that is in sports what we're asking people to do, to commit their free time, to follow it, to share it, to promote it. That's how it really succeeds. And to do that, you really need to make sure that those core followers are a part of it from the beginning, and feel, evangelized for it. And that's what we've tried to do with the Snow League, to build in the athlete perspective really early on, to get their feedback on everything that we do. What should the athlete lounge look like? What should the schedule look like? What works, and build that in from early on, because they're so core to snowboarding. In soccer's case, it's more what makes sense for the fans, because they're bringing that energy on the on the side that you see at the most successful soccer clubs. So while it might be a little different, it's that same approach of bringing in the core grassroots. But then the second key part is, how does that then translate into something really exciting that you share to this wider audience that's going to understand it and want to be part of it? And I think if you build that energy around it at the core, that's what starts to bring other people in and has that flywheel effect and that exciting effect. So you build this community that can grow and grow. And then I think the other big thing to do is, how do you create these big moments that break outside that bubble as well? So, in IndyCar racing at the Indy 500, it's, some big stunt where we take an Indy car out on the streets of New York or whatever, right? Something that's a little bit different, and that way you're attracting in a bigger crowd or audience. And someone like Red Bull is a pretty good example of being able to do that. In fact, we had the Red Bull Air Race at the track that I worked at, and they would come in and do some pretty amazing things. And working with that team was pretty eye-opening to how they thought about marketing and how they
Mhm.
thought about content, because they didn't think of it in that traditional way of, let's buy a bunch of billboards around Indianapolis and promote the Red Bull Air Race. It's instead, let's get someone that's dropped out of space and bring them in and do something really epic. So it's all those things that you guys are familiar with, and how do we create those moments for us? When we announced our snowboarders, we did a pretty cool content piece on billboards at Times Square, and had Sean, kind of FaceTime in and watch the snowboarders get announced for the league on this giant billboard in Times Square. And for the snowboard, it was really cool for them to be part of that and experience that and see that. And then they're sharing it on their socials, the media's picking it up. So it's, how do we be true to the core, but at the same time do things that get us outside and bring in that fresh audience? And kind of bridging that is the hardest juggling act in a lot of ways for what we want to do, because you can easily go too far in one direction or the other, and you can alienate the core pretty easily, or you can, not do enough to kind of break outside, and you can be kind of stuck in your bubble. And actually, the third and last piece is, how do you explain and introduce it? For cricket, that was a big challenge for me. Nobody in America knows what cricket is, right? Apart from people that grew up with it in India or England or Australia. If you didn't, the odds of you knowing the LBW law, and I'm not going to explain that right now, are pretty slim if you grew up in America. So we had to find really fun ways to introduce it, to collaborate with, content creators that work in baseball or other sports, where we could kind of translate things and build a story, and, build introductory content that can explain it. And I think the same is true in Snow League. Like, people have watched Sean in the Olympics or Eileen in the Olympics, and they kind of get it when they see it there, but they don't necessarily know the intricacies of the sport or all the tricks or what's actually happening. And if you're going to be watching it, for 5, 10 events a season, you really need to understand the granular details a little more than
Mm.
just tuning in for the Olympics to really get what's happening out there. And for me, coming from outside, someone that had just watched the Olympic content and highlights here or there, I'm kind of the perfect test case of, if I can understand it when we're putting it out on social and explaining it and using stats and new things, and Scotty can get into a lot of the things that we're doing on the broadcast side that are pretty interesting to explain what's going on, then you can start to follow it more and understand it, and then you're more interested and you start to get what's happening and why the athletes are reacting the way they are when something happens, and why the scoring works out the way it does, because it obviously feels like a more subjective sport when you look at it, but clearly there's a lot that goes into the judging and other things that do have a lot of logic to it that you might not know as an outsider. So that kind of explanatory part of it is really key as well, to make sure that when fans are tuning in, that they are really getting into the ecosystem and understanding it.
So, Scotty, maybe we just keep going on the explanatory part of it. I'm cognizant of the fact that we haven't really told everybody what the Snow League is. So maybe you could just give us the basics of it, but also bring us into the early meetings. Like, how were you counter positioning this against what already existed before we got started? Tom said you're trying to reinvent this category. It's super ambitious plan. So what was the opportunity that you saw, and in what ways are you trying to reinvent the sport of skiing and snowboarding?
Well, I think consistency. Up until the Snow League, for the most part, there had been a lack of consistency in terms of events for pipe specifically. There'd be one-off events like the U.S. Open or the X Games, but they're one and done. And then every 4 years, there's a Grand Prix cycle, which are the U.S. FIS events. And historically, there used to be four, and then due to kind of budget, realities, that got shifted to three during Olympic cycles, and even 1 year it was down to just a couple. So, start to build like some consistency, so these athletes have a schedule of premium events that have global television distribution, high-end production quality. They treat the athletes right from the moment they step into this town till the moment they leave, and really kind of elevate what they do and show what they do in the best light. Sean really wanted his experience as an athlete to be everyone's experience, and I think that was a driver behind it. So so being a part of that kind of foundational team is, I've been on a little over a year, and it came all together. It was, I think, Tom, there's only like 6 of us at the very beginning, and we're like, all right, well, what do we got to do that's like dramatically different than what's been done, and rethinking how we present the event on television and on streaming. Trying to get away from that, like, oh my God, did you see that? Like, moment, try and be more polished about the presentation, speak to a broader audience, but not alienate the core. Those mechanisms, and having gotten the Aspen event, the first event finished in March, I think we accomplished a lot of those kind of initial goals. And now it's just like fine tuning. And, our next event is in December, beginning of December in China. We're going to Yangding Snow Park, where the Olympics were held. Much different environment than what we had in Aspen. The pipe is Olympic level super pipe. Like, it's going to be the only focus. Where in Aspen, there was like a lot of other things to do because it's Aspen. Like, this is going to be like and this is an Olympic year. So, there's a lot of athletes who are fine tuning their craft at this moment to get ready for an Olympic push. So, we're kind of kicking the proverbial year off in half pipe. And then the weekend after ours, there's a FIS event at the same pipe. And then you start getting into the whole Grand Prix kind of qualifying for the teams, et cetera, et cetera. So, we really wanted to position ourselves as the most premium of those events, and really give the athletes, to Tom's point, like what do they need? What do they need to perform at their highest level? And when they walk in the door, they feel like that we're really taking care of them, and be it accommodations or food or rehab and like all those things that they need to be the best in the world. And right now, I think we're starting off in a good way.
It strikes me that Sean's involvement with the overall, project business and experience specifically has given you guys a lot to work with of like, this is what the athlete experience needs to be. This
Hmm.
is the kind of coverage that we want to see. And I think, to sort of address the broader topic of we're seeing this style of league show up in other sports as well. But what kind of strikes me also is that, it's not it's not like Sean White's Snow League, and it's not the same sponsors that he has as the partners of the Snow League, as far as I can tell. I'm really curious how that kind of works, and how you sort of pick and choose when you lean on Sean and when you kind of build sort of independent of Sean as your Scotty, in your case, like building out the broadcast side of thing, and then Tom, in your case, on the marketing side of things. Like, you do have one of the greatest snow athletes of all time, but I've got to imagine like there's a key man risk by hanging everything on him as well. How do you manage that? I guess maybe Scotty go first and talk about the broadcast side, and then Tom on the marketing side.
I think on the broadcast side, we Sean is going to be a part of the Olympic broadcast team. He's going to have that kind of Michael Phelps kind of position, and his relationship with NBC has been decades long. So for us, when we were doing our distribution deals, obviously going to NBC and going to the Olympic broadcasters as a foundational partner on the distribution side was pretty key. So so that opened up a door, and once you kind of get in the NBC of it all done, then the rest of them come on. So Eurosport came on next, and then next thing you know, we're in 200. We have 209 countries that we're distributing to. Across multiple different platforms, streaming and broadcast, right? So Sean was like pretty pivotal, just his positioning on that, but also there's been a desire with in snow sports that there's been an opportunity, a hole, if you will, in some consistency. So it also helps that we launched during an Olympic cycle that there's a lot of attention. Half pipe snowboarding and free skiing are the most watched younger demo Olympic sports, right? In terms of winter. And so, I think all of that just was a nice, calculated storm, timing wise, where it all made a lot of sense.
And Tom, from the marketing side of things, can you talk a little bit about sort of the parallels, like how you pull him in and how you kind of build separate?
Yeah, it's a great question. Something we definitely, are really thoughtful about. Sean and the Snow League, we know that the success, the future of this will be from a new generation of stars having the sort of profile Sean wants everyone to have. We want everyone to have, and they are the ones out there now on the half pipe, risking everything, and becoming the heroes of a new generation. So we want to tell that story. What Sean provides is an incredible amplification lever for that, and whether it's on his social or his media reach or his ability to connect with brands that can come in and want to be part of this and see the credibility that he brings to the table to kick off conversations. That's really important. But we're very focused on how we tell the story of the guys and girls who are out there now competing. So it's really cool actually to see Sean interacting with them now as the legend of the sport that they look up to and talk to, and he'll do content with them, and that will always get tons of views. But the competition is the key. What's happening out there on the half pipe is ultimately what's going to drive the success of the event and raise the profile of all these athletes. So we're very mindful of that. But there is no better personality than Sean to get that, to lead that. He sort of works with us in a really productive way. He's got so many good ideas. He'll come in with a really strong thought. We'll be able to build it and go, and he trusts us to go and deliver that. So it's a really thoughtful founder relationship that we have with Sean. But we're definitely not afraid to know that he's an unlock, right? And that's something we can use to help grow the league and grow the profile of everyone connected to it.
So maybe stepping back for a second, I'd love to just talk about the macro trend of new leagues starting, because I feel like the Snow League is part of a really exciting thing that's happening across different categories, right? We've seen what's happening with Live Golf, for example, in the golf world. I mean, even TGL, Tiger Woods, and Rory McIlroy have sort of teamed up to found kind of like an indoor golfing league. Then also in track and field, we see Grand Slam Track, which was started by Michael Johnson. And I think it's, there's sort of some growing pains, I think, in all those different examples. But it's an exciting moment where sports are being reinvented from the ground up. Why do you guys think that is? Like, is this just a combination of like where sports are progressing plus these new media distribution models? Like, why is this a moment of disruption for incumbent leagues and incumbent sporting franchises? Tom, maybe we start with you.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons for it. From obviously the huge shifts in media landscape over the last 2 or 3 decades, the availability of content, and the ability to follow on social and other channels. So many different things. I'm old enough. 30 years ago it was much different, right? You just followed what was on the television set in front of you, and you didn't have a lot of choice. Now we can discover things and find our own niches and become interested in that and support that. I think the other thing is there is more investment going into these emerging leagues that a lot of investors have seen, the potential upside here and are willing to back them. And that financial part of it is important to build what we're doing. We need to have a great group of investors that believe in this, which is what we have and what some of the other leagues that you mentioned have as well. And you also have this now, recently retired or, later in their career generation of athletes who have done great things and want to make sure their sports evolve and continue to grow in different ways. In Sean's case with the Snow League, or, Tiger with the Golf League that you mentioned, and others, Michael Johnson with Grand Slam Track and other things. So that's happening a lot too. And they have the profile to bring those opportunities to the table for investors. And I think you also have, and Scotty can probably talk to this, broadcasters and streamers, content platforms that are looking for more and more content. And sports is the one thread that people still follow live, still want to be, really into as a community. And those, because so many other things are fragmented and aren't followed in the same way anymore. But sports still has that ability to deliver something that attracts broad interest very quickly and in a live fashion. So you have a number of things happening at once that I think lead to the growth of these various emerging leagues. And I think, we're very aware some will succeed and some may struggle. That's just the nature of sports and business. But I think the ones that will do really well are the ones that are additive to their sport, that are bringing something new and valuable to athletes, to fans, to potential partners and broadcasters, and creating something new that people can follow and be part of. And those that are done in a thoughtful way. And I think we have an incredible team that from the beginning was very careful to make sure we had the right investment, the right plans, and the right timing to launch this, and we didn't rush it. We could have tried to do probably 2 or 3 events last winter, and we decided, no, let's focus on one. Let's knock it out of the park in Aspen, show what we can do, and then we can build gradually over each season and not try to bite off more than we can chew. And I think taking that thoughtful step-by-step approach while having a really high ceiling for investors to believe in and partners to believe in and athletes to believe in and aspire to is important, but it's also doing this in a sustainable way.
Scotty, anything you want to add there? I think it would be interesting for your take just from a broadcasting perspective with all these new disruptor leagues emerging, how you package something that's compelling to a distributor.
Well, I think Tom nailed it. I think there's a lot more need for live programming. There's sports delivers live in a unique way that no other content vertical really does. And there's consistency, right? Within a league or a season where you have the ability to start tease to another event, tease to another event. You build excitement, you build drama. There's so much that's going to happen between the events, all the social content that's created, the digital short form content that's created, and even some mid or longer form assets that are created that tell the story of the athletes as they do what they do. And then, really, I think a lot of these sports have matured to a point where they deserve to have this level of consistency and scale, where maybe 20 years ago there wasn't enough participants or awareness of some of these sports. And I think they've all kind of grown to a point where, I mean, think about golf as an example. Golf has been around forever, but now it's splintered into, it's not just the PGA anymore. It's Live, it's Tiger, and I would imagine there's probably another one coming, where you take a heritage sport like that and it scales, right? You're like all these different ways you can appreciate golf, and mostly that's because you have a lot of people playing a lot more golf than it was just kind of boardroom type people, older demo, but now it's there's a lot of kids at the golf course now. So I think that's part of it for the heritage sports, and then for the sports like snowboarding or free skiing, they've just kind of grown into their own, where you have an audience that grew up doing these things and can appreciate them at scale. And there is a need to feed these live streamers, media organizations. It's all consolidating between the broadcasters and the digital kind of the streaming machines are combining together, and they're battling, and live is really where they're going to get the most bang for their buck.
Tom, you were talking a little bit about growth and scale, and one of the questions I'd love to know is where you see that sort of going, because you have a set number of events. Winter is sort of annually finite. How do you see? You mentioned even like the high bar that the investors have and everything like that. What does that look like? Is it end up being more events? Does it end up being more broadcast content? Like how can this develop beyond sort of what's already in place?
Yeah, there's an incredible opportunity to grow, and winter actually spans a lot of the year when you look at both hemispheres. So there's opportunity to make it a year-round competition championship, right? And that's really what we're aiming for. It's 4 events in season one, but for this to really take hold the way we think it can, it should be more like, F1 or golf or tennis, where you've got this calendar of events that people are following week after week, and there are tour level events, or maybe some that have a different production level or a different personality to them. I think that's one fascinating part of what we can do. We can go to resorts that are very, very different from each other. And we're already doing that. We're in Aspen, which is literally a world away from the resort in Beijing, near Beijing, that we'll be at next early December, and then we're in Switzerland in Locks in March. Locks, incredible resort. They love freestyle there. It's kind of set up as our championship finale, and they somewhere where the kind of endemic culture around the sport is really strong. Aspen obviously has its own unique feel, celebrity, and everything you get in the town there. And then kind of breaking China, emerging sport over there. So we already have those distinct personalities, just like F1 has Monaco, which is very different than a Grand Prix in the Middle East or something. So we can go to these different places that showcase the resorts, and that bring that different flavor to it, and then build this narrative of event to event, following the championship points, the injuries, the ups, the downs, the rivalries, the head-to-heads. That's a different part of our format too, versus most half pipe events. So we're putting athletes head-to-head, best of three runs, who wins goes through, which is different than the typical kind of round elimination methods. So when you do that, you start to build these storylines that can gather across the season. So to really get that, you need more than 4 events in the long run. So we want to get to a larger number so that people are following that kind of month to month, and we can chase winter to a certain degree around the world to spread out the season and keep that going. But there are plenty of places. We're not always wedded necessarily to just half pipe either. We all know there are other disciplines that could be interesting to get into. We're adding skiing halfpipe for our second event in China, and we'll have that. There's plenty of upside to grow around both the number of resorts, places that we go to, the number of events, and then the types of discipline. And we already have men's, women's, halfpipe skiing, and snowboarding. So that's already four different competitions happening, and more than 50 athletes taking part in China. So we've already got a pretty broad base there, but there's tons of room to continue to grow. And then who knows in the future, right? You could do an exhibition, even a stadium event. Who knows at some point? So there's plenty of ways we can take it that will be different and fun to explore, and that's what really excites me about the Snow League, is where we can go to build it as this year-round competition that people are into and following, and have these ups and downs and spills and drama that goes on and on.
Before we talk about some of the events in particular, maybe going a little bit deeper on the league's relationship with the athletes, I think this would be really interesting, because at the end of the day, your incentives need to be aligned. You guys need to be doing something that helps the athletes build their careers within the sport, and they need to help you deliver a compelling product that you can then sell partnerships against. For example, just one example of ways that you would monetize it. And there's also some good examples about leagues who've done this well. The one that comes to mind is the Premier Lacrosse League, which I'm sure you guys have done some work around also. And it's a great story. We don't need to go too deep into it, but Paul Rabel, former professional lacrosse athlete, one of the greatest of all time, effectively went to all the professional athletes in the previous existing league, Major League Lacrosse, and said, hey, don't re-sign your contracts. Let's all spin out and start our own league. And it was a really brilliant move that eventually gave PLL the start that they needed. And over time, within the next couple of years, the two leagues, quote unquote, merged, but more or less PLL won because they took all the talent. How is the Snow League offering something different and compelling to the professional athletes? In what ways are you reaching out and selling them on the vision?
Probably the consistency. They get an appearance fee. The athletes aren't going to lose money when they come to the events. I mean, historically speaking, in this world, there's a lot of times that the bottom seed athletes would lose money by going to the events. So I think fundamentally, we're trying to make sure that these athletes can make a baseline living, being a professional athlete in the sport in which they love. I think that is just by itself is net different. So there's that piece. The prize purse being the largest ever within our space is another incentive. It was always part of the foundation of the league to make sure that these athletes are being just taken care of on the financial side. And then taking them and putting them in places where, some of them haven't been before. Like when we go to Locks, like free ski has never been in the pipe at Locks, which is like, I was a little surprised. I was like, really? And I was like, I've seen Locks and skiing. I'm like, oh, that was slopestyle. They've never had a free ski event in Locks. So all of a sudden, now you're bringing the athletes to something new, and it's exciting for them. So, and we're trying, we're also hero building. So we have heroes to build, household names to build. I mean, Sean understands what that means. Sean, he has a hard time getting through an airport. So how do we build that type of persona? And it's storytelling. It's the dramatic nature of the format. We're providing the audience more time with these athletes in terms of watching them. Like they're going to see the top 5, 10 athletes a lot. You see them a lot in terms of our event series, where you're seeing the best tricks and the best runs happening again and again and again and again, where some of the other events, you see that happen, but it only happens once or twice, not like 6 or 7 times within a day. So you're really giving them the platform to kind of excel. the financial backing to that to excel, and then arguably the momentum to really kind of turn their passion into a full time job, and kind of take a route that Sean had been able to take and kind of get back at the end.
I've got to imagine that it's pretty easy to get the athletes to comply when they're getting a pretty sizable appearance fee, and there's, I think it's over $1 million on the line for the prize purse. I'd love to know and have you go a little bit deeper into that hero making. Like when you think about these top 10 athletes specifically and how to really make that resonate with the audience and the people that are watching your broadcast, how do you think about sort of storytelling around an athlete?
You got to make them relatable, right? I think that's first thing. You got to tell them that, growing up, like Chase Josie, like you have these guys that are like everybody else guys. Like you see them on the street and you'd be like, oh, this regular guy, but they're doing doing triple corks, right? They're superheroes. But you got to really explain that the guy next door or the gal next door is special, and they have a same kind of relatable background, but they've been able to take a passion and then scale it, and then ultimately turning it into a career. And so kind of taking a page out of my historical experience, being able to scale that, and be it within the broadcast, and we're doing it on our social side with social series. We have a series that we are doing called Momentum that really looks at like the day in the life, that really kind of follows the athletes into what they do and kind of how they get there. I think those pieces are critical, and then really opening up the athletes to some of our sponsors. So some of our sponsors have brought them in to their own fold to be additional sponsors. So I think all of that mixed together, and then obviously scaling the stories as they grow. As we grow, the storytelling will grow as well. And you have to do the hero building. You have to make household names, and right now, and on the snowboarding side, we're dominated by the Japanese. The Japanese team is awesome. Like they're like almost untouchable. But there was a session in Saas last week or 2 weeks ago that the Americans are starting to throw down triples, so we shall see a more level playing field, I hope, in as we get into this next 2 or 3 months of competition, and we're going to start seeing that this dominance within the Japanese may get knocked off, maybe, and then as everything progresses and the playing field levels, it usually levels for a bit, and then there's usually something that happens, and then there's like another kind of trick or thing that kind of sets one or two people apart, and then everyone else catches up. So we're about to get to that leveling. I think we're at the leveling now where at Aspen, it was the first podium that everyone on the podium had triple corks. That had not happened before. So now that's not going to be that special anymore. So now that kind of bar has been set and then now surpassed, we'll see how those stories and those kind of that kind of drive to excellence, changes on the men and the women's side. So on the women's side, you have doubles are being thrown down. There's kind of rumor that Maddie's got a different variation of a double. So there's some interesting things happening on the performance front, which create great story, and then of course the personal journeys, right? You have someone like Alexander Barbary, who kind of was like this unknown American, who all of a sudden was the top American at the Snow League event, which is awesome. So I love seeing that stuff happen, and then and it really kind of taking these athletes and really making them more touchable and accessible, I think is critical.
I think what's also really interesting and almost unique to us, or certainly we're in a small group, that we're a truly global sport, and these athletes have followings in so many countries. You mentioned PLL, and what they've done is amazing, but there's kind of a relatively limited global audience there, right? For us, we're already we have, 30 plus Olympians on our roster. I think we got 11 or 12 countries just from our, 50 athletes at the moment, and that will continue to grow. We're broadcasting 170 plus countries, and a lot of our athletes are national heroes. Someone like Ayumu in Japan has, an incredible following, and sometimes because we're talking from sort of a North American perspective, it's really important for us to remember how big the global opportunity is here. Skiing and snowboarding, 130 million plus participants. That's more than golf, more than tennis. If we can even sort of convert a relatively small percentage of that who follow it during the Olympics to follow it year round and follow these athletes at our competition and at other competitions, then we'll really have succeeded, and we can build on that massive base and that massive opportunity, and the way these athletes resonate in their home countries and the stories we can tell. And that's why we're leaning on content creators and agencies and others in China or Japan or in Europe that can help us make sure those stories are reaching the press, the media, fans in those markets as well. So it's a truly global effort to do that. We'll take a kind of step by step build it approach there, but I think that's one of the most exciting things about this, that there's the cap on it is really high, because we have so many places where the sport resonates and these athletes are heroes.
Really, really fascinating point and contrast there with the PLL that I hadn't thought about. Just the natural, much larger size of the potential audience here with skiing and snowboarding, which maybe is a good opportunity to segue and talk about the season one events, because it is global. Aspen, you mentioned, outside of Beijing, it looks like coming up here in a few weeks' time, and also the European market. So you got North America, Asia, and Europe. I'm sure that is strategic. Talk about Asia in particular, how you guys are preparing for, it sounds like your first foray into that market. What have you learned? What excites you about what's happening in the Asian market beyond the fact that Japan is dominating on the athlete side? Maybe Tom, we can start with you.
Yeah, we're really, really dug deep in there at the moment. Scotty's ahead of me. He said he got his visa. I haven't got mine yet, but so it's a lot of this. It's a lot of back end logistics to going to China for us. Obviously, enormous barriers in culture and language, but see those as opportunities. That's where we've connected with some incredible people on the ground there who are representing us, who have launched our social platforms out there, who are building content, translating, giving us that cultural context to make sense. We had Sean go out there in September with our CEO, Omar Eitzman, and the reception they got just going around Beijing and Shanghai and Tokyo was really incredible to see. Some public events with Sean where the enthusiasm was kind of what you'd hope for and expect. For snowboarding, we had one of our athletes out there with him as well. So you see that buzz, you see how young the audience is there too. I think that's one of the keys that gets us most excited when you look at the audience in Asia for snowboarding, is it's incredibly youthful. And it sort of feels like the future there. You're stepping into the sport having that really bright horizon. But also from a kind of business governmental perspective in China, a ton of support for winter sports. It's clearly an important priority there. So that's, in somewhere like China, clearly a key to being able to succeed and have that support. But there's lots of brands and businesses that want to jump in, that see the potential and the reach. Eileen Gu, one of our ski athletes, needs no introduction, but clearly megastar in China. So to be able to go there with Sean, with his history, especially in Japan, where he's been, I don't know, dozens of times and loves it, and then someone like Eileen in China, we've got this ability to break through the noise quickly. But I think ultimately it is that youthful energy around it, and the kind of culture, the fashion, the style, all of that fits in really well with what we're trying to build and where we're coming from, and gives the upside to build something pretty cool. And one little anecdote, and Scotty can probably give you more detail, but our broadcast from Aspen in Korea did incredibly well. and got some massive eyeballs kind of unexpectedly for us. It was not an area where we put incredible amount of marketing or resources into, but clearly there are these audiences there that are looking for this content, that want it, and I think we're just scratching the surface.
Lucy, how about that? The Korean reference again here on the podcast.
Yeah,
We got to do a deep dive on Korea at some point.
something's happened there.
Something's happening in Korea across different sports. We just had Kyle Siegel, the founder of Raid Research, a very cool new Four Seasons outdoor brand, who talked about the momentum of his brand new startup that they're having in the Korean market, and he views it as a mystery himself. So it deserves further investigation from the podcast here. Sorry, Scotty.
No. I was just gonna kind of just one additional anecdote on China. So one of the things I worked on a movie with Jake Burton right before he passed, and one of the things Jake had completed right before he passed was he had launched Burton in China. And it was a huge focus for him. Like it was like the last really big thing he had done before he had passed away. And we were talking with him, and he was like, the future of snowboarding is in China. China is going to dominate once they get their hands around it. And he wanted Burton to be that kind of founding partner, if you will. And so it always kind of sat on the back of my head. And of course, when I saw China come up on the schedule when we came on the Snow League, I was like, oh, this makes tons of sense. And if you start looking at like resort numbers, where we're going, it's like dominated by snowboarders. It's like Mammoth in like 1998. It was like snowboarders. And so I think that's a huge opportunity for us to scale. You have snowboarding that's so young, and then you have Eileen, who brings in like this, she's like LeBron in the States, like in China, right? So you bring a global hero like that in during an Olympic cycle, like, the potential is pretty significant.
Yeah, you can't overstate her impact in that market. I mean, she's probably one of the most famous people in China,
Yeah.
and she happens to be skiing in your
Yeah.
event. That was a masterful move to add her onto the global ambassador team for the overall project.
Yeah, we were very fortunate with that. Very fortunate.
Scotty, I'd love to know, and obviously you haven't been there yet, but how are you preparing for broadcasts in a place like China where, I mean, even some of the basic X's and O's, like you need different chargers for your production equipment and stuff like that. Do you bring in like a localized team and then manage it from a global scale? Is that sort of like, so you have to find like an on-site production group to do it, or do you send over quite a few people?
It's a mixed, actually. We have a production team that we work with here that's kind of like managing the creative look and feel. So the key director, producer, line producer, like the key roles, we'll call it the executive production team. And then we're hiring Shanghai Media's technology group, which is one of the largest broadcasting groups in China. They're our local broadcaster. They've also did the Olympics. So they know in terms of camera ops and those types that have Olympic background and frankly, World Cup background. So we're using the same kind of key talent in terms of camera ops and those types. Where it gets interesting is not everyone has to speak English, right? Only people that we're interfacing with have to speak English. So, so the director obviously he's a Brit. So the director is going to be speaking and doing calls to the camera ops. So the camera ops have to be bilingual. So certain roles have to be. Other roles, full tech roles, fiber guys, all that stuff, they can be, fully local. So it's a mixed bag. But for the most part, it's been relatively, I would say simple, but pretty streamlined. On the tech side, like they have better tech. I mean, we talked about it a little earlier before we kicked off. Is the technology they have in China is bar none. Like what they have as a basic truck, OB truck, is one of the higher end trucks in the States. So what the NFL uses on a weekly basis is kind of their normal truck. Their super duper trucks, which they're going to bring to the Olympics, are like, you know, 8K, every bell and whistle, AI built in, blah, 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 blah. So really, really awesome, the ability to kind of get access to some amazing technology and some amazing talent that knows how to utilize that technology as well. So on that end, it's been great. Now, of course, there's the language thing that's just going to come into play. We have enough, though. The production team that we're working with has done events in China, so that won't be, surprise. I think it'll probably be a little bit more of a bigger surprise for me. But since I'm not like calling stuff, it's less of a big deal. But I think we're wrapping our hands around it pretty well. But it definitely is going to be a challenge. And we're we're still in negotiations on doing our distribution deals in China. But for the most part, we will have a Chinese feed for local language. And then to the comment about Korea, we had the Korean broadcaster did a Korean language feed. They took our clean feed and they did their own play-by-play. So they were able to localize. They were able to take the English feed or the local feed and kind of and that fed the audience. So on that note, where we have language as a potential barrier, we're opening that up to localization as needed.
Dylan, do you know the difference between a clean and a dirty feed? I feel like this is going to come into play, especially as trail running continues to develop.
Well, can I guess? I would guess a clean feed is something that would include, the likes of Salema Masakela on like a official broadcast, and a dirty feed would be a bootlegged version with like the equivalent of a Manning cast kind of thing. Am I correct or incorrect here?
A clean feed is got no graphics.
Ah,
And the audio is separated. So when we send the audio out, you can turn audio channels off. So if let's say it's Salema's doing play-by-play, we could turn Salema off and there's a real-time transcript that's being sent out. So a local Salema is reading it and being able to put their own spin on what they're seeing. And then sometimes if they have really talented or really experienced play-by-play, they don't even read the transcript. They just are announcing and doing the play-by-play on their own. So
super interesting.
So it's without graphics, and then the audio is separated. You have there's multiple different feeds that go out, but there could be a dirty feed. The other thing about this SPO TV, the feed that went to Korea, is they had a real-time AI that converted the graphics. So what it did is it read the lower third and then instantly wrote it in Korean. It wasn't us that did that. It was the broadcaster that did that. So China has the same tool set. And because most of them take these Western events and, as a Western producer, it's, you need to bring in a local language person to actually do all the lower thirds and everything, all the graphics. That's tough because there's only so much room in the truck. If you can do that on the receiving end, on the distribution end, then that makes it so much better. So they built all those tools on already, and now with all the AI tech happening, it's all being automated. It's awesome.
Yeah. So, guys, I come from the world of trail running, and I actually do the broadcast for the Western States 100, which is sort of the Super Bowl for our community. And this year, for the first time, we had 1.5 million viewers on the live broadcast on YouTube.
Awesome.
And for the first time, we received requests from Spanish language broadcasters, Chinese broadcasters to syndicate our feed. So in all likelihood, in 2026, we will experiment with that for the first time and take it global, as you guys have said. That's a really interesting opportunity. All right, before we get to BPC, maybe Tom, we can close with you. Just sort of like, this is season one. What are you guys hoping to get from it? What would be success in this year that would set the foundation for what I'm sure you guys view as a long-term project?
Yeah, I think it is people following this as a season-long championship, because that is truly what's different about this and what will set this up for the long run. That people care by the time we get to Switzerland to locks next March. people care who wins and lifts the championship trophy, which, by the way, is going to be a pretty epic trophy that we'll unveil at some point in the winter. But when that moment comes, and um, four different athletes lift the trophy for their discipline, I think that is going to be the capstone on the season. And if people have followed the narrative that the athletes have the rivalry, and in snowboarding and skiing too, it's really cool to see that they have this rivalry, but also this camaraderie, and they desperately want to win, but they also care for each other in a lot of cases. So you have these human dynamics that'll come across on Scotty's broadcast and on the content we push out, and want fans to believe in that and see that and feel it and feel that emotion. And if that can come through, I think that's starts to realize the vision that we can create this league that gives a new platform for athletes, and something new for fans to follow and really care about, and want to look forward to each season to get to that championship moment.
Well, consider me a new fan, guys. Can't wait to check out
Love it.
the stop in China here in December. We close all of these episodes with our traditional segment, brand product content, where we share things that we've noticed recently from across brands, products, or content. I hope you guys brought something to share with the audience. Maybe Scotty, we can start with you.
I was thinking product because content's it's content all day long. So I just purchased recently, the last couple of weeks, this new Breathe Right thing that's magnetic called Intake. And what it does, it puts magnetic little stickers on the side of your nose instead of it being just kind of strip that you end up throwing away. And then you put this basically this plastic strip on top, and then it really opens up your nostrils. So I'm a mountain biker, so when I ride, it just allows for it opens it up more so than the Breathe Right strips did. The Breathe Right strips would get you let's call it 70%. These is 100. So and reusable, relatively cheap, and I gotta say it's been noticeable. So Intake.
Very cool. Tom, you want to go next?
Man, I did not think of having a nose related item. I love that. Scotty. I was thinking about content, and actually, as I'm getting much, much older now, frankly, and I have kid, my oldest kid is going to become a teenager while I'm in China in a few weeks. So, and my job in marketing is to somehow keep up with all this content, right? It's really hard the older you get, because you start to realize how out of touch you are very quickly. And my kind of core sport is soccer. That's what I grew up playing the most and following the most. So I kind of challenge myself to keep up with the trends and what the kids are watching, and what's being targeted at kids like my son who love soccer. Things like the Baller League. I don't know if you've heard of the Baller League, but as we've been talking or podcast about emerging leagues, the Baller League is kind of this mix of celebrity content, teams that play with a celebrity manager, a famous player, or personality, and it's very contained in kind of this arena setting with music and drama and kind of contrived moments that break up the sport, and it's kind of the opposite of everything I consider pure to soccer. So I find it really hard, but I kind of make myself pay attention and follow it, because if I'm not sort of understanding what's happening, I'm not going to be able to even relate to what I'm doing in my job in the long run. So sometimes it's good to consume content that you find vaguely objectionable, just to make sure you're not completely losing sight of what younger generations apparently think is really awesome. And you see what's cool about it, right? You get into it and you start to follow it and understand it. But I definitely like to try to make sure that I'm opening up to those new forms of content.
I love this era in content and sports where these moments can happen. I think if I'm hard pressed to think about a recent soccer moment, the thing that instantly comes to mind is Max Foch was competing in a charity match, and the ref pulled a yellow card on him, and he had an Uno reverse yellow card in his pocket,
So,
and put it in the ref's face. like you can't do that in regular soccer, but like you can have these moments that like resonate around the world. And I wonder how that impacts the actual growth of a sport. And I've
Yeah.
got to imagine there's only more of that coming as, things like Snow League continue to develop and more of these things like Baller League and everything else come around.
Yeah, in all likelihood, that reverse Uno moment got more views and more impressions across social media than most professional soccer matches, right? And most like heroic goals, etc. So you can't underestimate the power of those moments.
Yeah, I saw a funny thing yesterday. A ref had thrown a flag during a football game, and it hit a player, and the player like took like he like fully acted out like he got hit and landed on the ground like a full soccer kind of like fall. It was really, really funny, but it was something that you wouldn't expect it out of football, and then you like see it, and you're just like, and everyone's laughing. Even the ref was laughing. And refs don't ever have any emotion, so it was pretty funny. I'm like, you guys will end up seeing that through your feed somewhat.
Hilarious.
That type of thing. I agree. I think, kind of kick the piss out of us a little bit. It's kind of good.
Yeah. All right, Lucy, you want to go next?
Sure. I've got one that I actually heard on a recent podcast that we did. Somebody was telling me about it, and I actually went through and followed through on it. There is a program called ManyChat. I don't know if you guys have used this, but in my world of content, there's sort of this one-way conversation where I'm putting stuff out, and then it just goes out into ether, and I start working on the next one. And if you've ever seen someone post on Instagram and then they say like, "Oh, comment the word bike and I'll DM you, the thing," that's actually not that creator just like furiously DMing everybody back. It's this program called ManyChat. And you can set it up with Instagram, with TikTok, with Messenger, all these different platforms where you can actually connect your content to something. So whether it's a new piece of content that you just put out or an affiliate thing you're doing or whatever else. But it's really interesting to me because I think on the content side of things, or even just Instagram on its own, there's sort of like two camps of people. There are people that use these social media platforms as sort of like a photo book, and then there are other people that are using it as a business. And connecting the dots between content and a desired outcome has always been a little wonky. And this program, so far since I've been using it, seems to be that piece that I think I've been missing in terms of putting my stuff together. So ManyChat is the name of it.
Very cool. All right. I've got other nose related stuff to share on BPC. Aaron knows what this is because he told me about it yesterday. In your guys' world, in the snow sports world, there's a popular podcast, The Bomb Hole. Yesterday, Lutzi told me about their new product, Run Through a Wall, which is smelling salts. So smelling salts have been, as sort of a subculture phenomenon recently, a way to wake your mind up, I think, in high pressure situations. And evidently the Bomb Hole guys made a brand around it in a way that I think is just brilliant. And Lutzi told me about how at Red Bull Rampage last week that there was some athletes who were rocking a nose strip that was branded Run Through a Wall. And I thought that was brilliant real estate for product placement or brand placement. And also, of course, relevant to the product itself, which involves smelling something. So Run Through a Wall, I guess, related to Scott's contribution here. Nose strips, smelling salts.
Well, it is like, it like you, the thing about the Red Bull hat that I don't think anyone really wraps their head around, Lucy, you'll get this, is the reason why Red Bull did the hat is because you don't take a picture of any athlete without their head. So you own the head, right? Well, the only place historically you've been able to brand is here, right? But now you can brand here. And I'll tell you, like I see on my son's football team, like, well, half the kids have some kind of nose strip and there's some kind of something written on it, but it's like usually some kind of message of like toughness or whatever. But to that point, use it as a branding tool is actually
very smart.
Brilliant.
Very, very smart.
Brilliant branding tool.
So anyway, I'm stealing that from Lutzi. He shared this with me on the phone yesterday, so feels relevant to our conversation today in multiple ways, both with snow sports and with Scott's nose strip recommendation.
Well, no
Yeah.
strip to marketing, right? It just makes sense, right?
Hey, well, Scotty, Tom, it's great to meet you both. Congratulations on what you guys have built so far. Good luck with everything. And yeah, maybe we do another check-in after season 1 and see how what progress
Yeah.
you're making, how goals have changed, things like that. But first and foremost, thanks for coming on the show.
Would love to hear your feedback on what you guys watch and see too at the end of the season, and see if there's any areas of improvement or whatever. Feedback would be awesome.
Amazing.
Yep. Come out sometime. We'd love to have you at
For
an event.
sure. I mean, Aspen's always,
Awesome.
I mean, Locks would be awesome. Like, it's Locks, but like Aspen, Aspen.
All right. Hook us up with VIP credentials. We'll be there, live podcasts, and etc.
That
There we
should be
go.
a
On our
problem,
way.
right, Tom?
Done
A
deal.
done deal.
Done deal.
You
heard it here first.
There you go.
You know, Aspen.
Think about all the Olympians you'll be able to bring into the kind of the mix.
It's happening. It's
There you
happening.
go.
Stay
It's
tuned.
awesome. All right, boys.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having
Be
us.
good.